welcome back to Razorblade Pie, a bite-sized book club about the short speculative fiction of Harlan Ellison, my favorite author. I'm Michael Swaim, your intrepid host, and sometimes I have a long spiel about the introductory stuff surrounding the story in question of the day. Today I don't, so we're just going to dive right in, and that's because I believe I read this on and sent it to my guest on the only place I could find it, which is like a website where there's a Xeroxed copy of an old magazine dated October 37th. That's weird. No, October 1981. And an illustration of Mr. Potato Head arguing with Mrs. Potato Head. That's like the main thing. So not the ideal reading experience. But he muscled through anyway. Hey, you know him, you love him. We usually talk Charlie Kaufman. This time we're not. It's Brooks Brown.
How are you doing, Mr. Swaim?
I'm doing great. Better now with those dulcet tones in my ears.
Oh, I do what I can. I do what I
can. So, first things first, it came out. I mean, I asked you to be on just because you're my pal, but I had assumed you were familiar with Ellison. You're extremely well read. But you seem to light up to some degree. So what's your Ellison relationship overall?
Well, I actually have a long running personal relationship in a couple ways. So first, one of the stories, I shouldn't say books because it was way too early in the world for me to read really complex sci-fi, but I did play this lovely video game called I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream that absolutely, we'll just say was a enlightening moment. It was an adventure game in the realm of sort of the Monkey Islands or Sam and Max's King's Quest.
Yeah, exactly like those.
but also but darker and smarter and a lot more interesting, to say the least. Although I'm still a fan of the original Two Monkeys. The game, and what would turn out to be the story in the book would definitely have a lasting impact on kind of, I don't know, my sort of swing when it comes to where I land on a lot of entertainment. I like the darker, more fucked up stuff.
Sensibility.
Yeah. And then it happened to be when I was working for Starbreeze, I was leading a lot of licensing plays and trying to find partners for games or VR or this and that. And I happened to spend a lot of time with Ellison's estate in the year before he passed. He was very ill, to try to figure out how we might bring some of it to bear. And it was one of those things that I'll never forget, because the guy who was like handling his estate is hardcore Ellison fan, but on top of that, someone who had kind of worked with him and really cared a lot about him. And we bonded when I told him that I wanted to bring some of Ellison's works to VR, and he rolled his eyes and I said, no, I want to use them to ruin people's day. And his eyes lit up.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people, when they pitch Ellison stuff, they end up in that Philip K. Dick thing where it's like, I want to make something cool that blows people's minds. And Ellison was, like myself in a way, a bit of a misanthrope, to say the least. And I think
famous curmudgeon.
Yeah.
It's been mentioned before on this podcast, ranges from, it's cute how he's like a curmudgeon and very blunt, to people who are like, I actually hate him. I think he's a mean man.
Yes.
It seemed to be the reports. It's that whole spread.
Yeah, very much. And so that was a fun story. And then I do have to share that when you sent this to me, I realized I didn't have enough Ellison on my bookshelf. And so I had to find a local sci-fi store, and I spent far too much money on a whole bunch of pulp Harlan Ellison books.
Yeah.
It made me all happy. So no, I'm
glad.
I'm a huge Ellison fan. I'm a huge fan of unique science fiction of that era. Jack Vance and Ursula Le Guin would be the others that I love from that era. I'm not as much of a sort of Asimov Heinlein type. I like the weirder shit that pushes a darker line.
Bradbury?
Less so. Not as much.
Yeah. I think he has great sci-fi concepts. Certainly not as dark, though.
No, it's the darkness I like. Again, this is not saying the others aren't great
Philip
writers.
K. Dick goes trippy. Yeah, they all have their lane. Yeah, for sure.
For sure.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I know it. I've come to love him so much that I will buy stuff with his name on it just because I haven't heard of it before.
Same here.
And I was in a cool bookstore in Detroit and saw a thing called The Glass Teat by Harlan Ellison. I was like, oh, is this short story I've never heard of? And it turns out that it's reprints of magazine articles from like the late 80s to early 90s where he was a TV reviewer for a couple years in there. So it's like Harlan Ellison opining on this week's episode of like Jake and the Fat Man or whatever. Very boring to flip through. But let's get into
I actually like it. I have a copy. I have a copy behind me.
Oh, Glass Teat? Okay.
Yeah, and I actually thought it is not what I thought as well.
It's an interesting artifact, I guess.
The cover is a lie. Like the cover is very cool looking and like, oh my God. And then yes, the inside is far less. It's not normal Ellison. I still liked reading it because it was really weird. I just found it super surreal to read.
It is because he still writes to the top of his intelligence. So it's like if
TV Guide was written by Einstein. It's very strange.
Right. Reading Hunter S. Thompson felt like that. When a teacher introduced that, I'm like, this was really journalism? No shit? This reads like a real book. And he's like, yeah, that's what was interesting about Hunter S. Thompson. Cool. Okay, so let's dive in. I haven't even mentioned the story yet. I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, of course, probably one of his biggest hits. I feel like this one was a big hit, but I don't know how I determine that because there's no charts of sci-fi popularity. But I've heard it mentioned by other people I know who love Ellison a lot. It's called On The Slab. And Brooks, if you wouldn't mind getting us through the boring part, what was the story about in a nutshell? Just pitch the premise to the audience, please.
Yeah, a poor farmer who's got a small failing apple orchard that happens to be struck by lightning all the time. Comes to unearth a beast, a gigantic human type thing that fucks with his head, and then lo and behold, it's King Kong. I mean, it's King Kong with an existential crisis mixed in, because he ends up becoming this big show piece that people come from all over to see instead of studying, instead of trying to figure out. It becomes a gawking carnival. And lo and behold, it turns out that the beast is not dead. It's this giant sort of pseudo human. And in his, I mean, spoilers, I guess.
Oh yeah. We're there.
Yeah, we're there. It's 3 pages, 4 pages. It's nothing. So right. Spoilers, but
you could quickly read it in the gap between now and when he spoils it. But
yeah, pretty much. And it ends with the guy who's kind of the huckster, guy who owns the space and is being the guy who showed King Kong off to the world. The monster, the beast, this giant human starts talking sort of to him as he's dying, as death is taking him, and says to him, I am what you would be if you could earn it. Or what was the phrasing exactly? If you deserved it.
If you were worthy.
If you were worthy. Yeah. Which is a downer ending.
Super, super downery. Yeah, and highly implied that it's also the Prometheus myth, right? He
Correct.
says, you brought us fire.
He is God. He is God.
Since for it. Yeah. Because the vulture comes and eats out his liver or heart. It varies based on your translation of the myth. But that's it. Thank you very much. Why do you think I paired this story with you? Because that's another game of this podcast, is there's very particular reasons I picked each story and paired it with that person.
Well, so
I hope this one's fairly obvious.
Well, it's not. I have 2 theories.
Oh, good.
And there's a good chance they're both wrong.
Hard. Too hard.
So there's a chance they're both wrong. So the first is what I would say is the surface reason, which is I have been very outspoken on how I adore playing with death, what death means, what life means. And here is basically a fable about, the death of the farmer, the class struggle that is sort of within it, the finding out that the capitalist who sort of takes it over, who finds his work to be deeply important and valorizes himself and lies to himself, but it turns out he's basically cursed humanity by doing it. That shit I'm always on fire with, and I talk like that even in my personal life or at work. I'm awful like that. So that's one possibility. The other is, and it's I don't think it's the reason you chose it, but the reason this story actually resonates deeply with me is I've experienced being that dude. I spent a lot of years doing anti-bullying campaigns. I was a student at Columbine and lost a lot of friends. And I spent a long time sort of believing I was doing stronger, more powerful work, that I was important, or that the work I was doing was because it made people happier, whatever it may be.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a shift in my life that happened after about a decade of it, that I started to be able to see that the work I was doing was more ego driven. It wasn't actually making the world better, that I was in service of things I wasn't super proud of, and it's across the board, and made me take sort of a deep, hard look at myself. It's one this book, this story is one I'd read before, but that's why it
Mm-hmm.
sticks with me today, even reading it again after so many years. Um, it's I mean, it's a story about how we fool ourselves into believing the silly things that we're doing are important, when really there's much more important things that can be done.
Yeah, what's his name? Neller, I think. Yeah,
Yes. Yeah,
Neller.
Frank Neller.
Uses the word ennobled and feels and talks about how he's doing good work and starts sleeping in the room with the guy.
Because he deserves it.
Uh, right, exactly. And pointedly, he came in minutes before a team of scientists were about to orchestrate, like, its removal to a public space where it can be studied. Instead, he swept in and for $3,000 flat, like, secured all rights to it.
Yeah, it's a
Uh,
pretty hard line. Again, I bring up King Kong because I think it's pretty clear that that's a
he
little
calls it the ninth wonder of the world because
in
King Kong
reference.
was
Yeah,
the eighth. Yeah.
there's the hard reference alone, but the idea that, hey, there's this thing that literally changes all of humanity, and if we understood it, it would change the course of humanity, but we want to sell tickets to it.
Yeah.
that
Right.
that feeling, it's a thing. I've struggled with, the work I do, the work I have done,
Mhm.
and so that's why those are the two reasons. I don't think the second one. The second one's more personal, but
No.
possible. We've talked
I'm
slightly
like,
about that
oh my
shit.
gosh,
Um,
bullseye. But yeah, I have different, there's different friendships bring out different parts of each other, I would
mm,
say. And like Abe and I will almost exclusively usually talk story structure or film or something in that realm. And then like my best buddy Griffin, because I've known him since I was 5, he's my repository where we can dwell on the past and remember. We often talk about remember when that shit happened or whatever. And I feel like you're my philosophy guy,
oh,
and
I'm flattered.
Deleuze has obviously come up in the Kaufman episodes we've done, but not just philosophy. I feel like you're my big thinker guy. I
Oh,
love to ponder big things, and I feel like you're a pattern seer, a trend seer, a sociology, a history, a philosophy guy, and into archetypes. When and the abstraction and the things that we build with our minds, which not everyone is, or a lot of people want to talk about. I would say the majority of story imbibers actually want to live in a world that feels cool with characters that feel like friendly and remind them of people they know. I like hard. This is why I love sci-fi short stories. I just what's your idea?
yep.
Like these people are fake anyway. What's your idea about the nature of life or whatever? Bake that shit in.
Well, it's why I have so
Um,
much trouble finding good things to read that's fiction. It's the reason I have, behind me, I have probably 1,500 books, I think, at last count. And of
mm,
those, I want to say 50 of them are fiction. Like, there's a reason for that. And I don't, it's tough for me to find things that are interesting that aren't just sort of retreading the same Lord of the Rings kind of, hey, there's a bunch of people, and really it's the real ring is the friendship we made along the way, um, or
what
whatever
gets
it
me is
might be.
moral duality.
Yeah.
Anytime a fantasy series that claims to be epic goes, there's like a darkness and a light, I go like, I'm out, dude. It's so boring. It's
Yeah,
so not
it's tough, and
how
it's why
life is.
it's also why I love Ellison, because I think he's in the he's in the strange love category for a reason. Um,
Hmm.
Not to mention that this takes place in, I believe, Rhode Island, which is
Yes.
like not
I
that's not an accident. So
Oh yeah, very cool detail this time that I never picked up before. I mean, it's there very obviously. I guess I just didn't recall it. But he talks about Poe and Lovecraft having been in Rhode Island while they wrote some of their more notable works,
mhm.
and sort of loosely ties it to maybe it was the influence of Prometheus being buried there. I'm like, that's a very cool thought. Like maybe Lovecraft and Poe were tuned into actually how
Love it.
primordial, like how cosmic horror really was. Yeah.
But no, I'm
Very
flattered. I'm
cool.
flattered you think of me that way, Mike. I love
Oh,
that.
good. One time it was just, well, it's Bridget's house. Like, you're super competitive. They fight in this one. So you got a pretty good one. But I'm gonna shuffle the. You know what? I'm just gonna like let it rip and freestyle because I do send questions out. But I
I
feel like,
did
did
not
you
read
find
the
the story
questions.
impactful? Blah blah blah. Yeah, we're already in the midst of it. So I like to ask about style before super like getting super deep into the meaning, which is of course the juiciest best part. But did you notice how does Harlan's style hit you? Because obviously you've read a breadth of it, and something we've experienced on this show is it like I mean, he had a long career, but also he seems to get off on being very different at different
Well,
in
it's
different stories. Some are transparent but horrifying, like I Have No Mouth. Some are like very whimsical and folklorish, like Repent Harlequin. And then some are super trippy and psychedelic, where he actually is clearly a master of writing and breaks formats in a way that is innovative. Where would you say On the Slab lands, and like, what's your favorite Harlan? Super trippy or
uh,
button down or
I mean,
what?
I like to your point. The thing I love the most is that none of his books or stories are about the characters. Uh,
Mhm.
Often you see writers, you naturally build in tension. Oh, what's going to happen to them? And this On the Slab does my favorite thing, and Harlan does it a lot. He tells us at the beginning, "Don't get attached to this dude. He kills himself." It's like the second sentence. Like,
Mhm. Yeah.
he's going to kill himself. Don't care about this guy. This ain't the point. The real meaning is a little bit later. And I adore that so very much. It allows me as a reader to go, cool. He's recounting sort of facts and the story. I'm not supposed to be attached to actually almost any of these characters. He's very upfront for what happens to each one of them, with Neller being the exception, but Neller is ultimately our vehicle in the story. And
Mhm.
again, he makes it about the idea rather than any character. And he does it from the second sentence. And I adore that.
Yeah, that's a handy he does that repeatedly, I think. If you blow up the surprise, it's a handy way to almost immediately draw the attention to the meta and say, you will feel dread and tension, but it's not about the fate of this dude. Like, don't plant yourself on the street level. We are the gods watching this shadow play, especially in this story, and I'm teaching you something here. So, like, watch the master work and don't think about the little people. Think about the story that I'm telling you. A lot of his stories come from like a God's eye view, which I do think ties into an ego-driven. He's an ego-driven dude in large part, I think. Um, but and yet, and as he opines at length in his intros, which are famously like super revealing across his career, he does have a deep abiding love of or not wanting to be lonely, being scared of the things a human, do I not bleed, wanting the best for the people he loves. But he finds that when he looks at humanity as a whole, he can't help but be like pretty cynical and disgusted that it basically sucks.
Yeah,
Uh,
he
yeah.
even oscillates. It's I know I would never say Harlan Ellison's a person who's filled with hope, but and this may be me putting myself in him, but his misanthropy isn't completely nihilistic. Like, it's clear that he has a part of
That's
him that's
right.
begging
Yeah.
for turn this around. We can fix this. Come on, people. We don't have to do these things. These are warning tales. I'm like, it's a
Right.
completely different mentality than literal nihilistic. We're fucked. Get over it. It's over.
That's true. He has a lot of like alacrity about him. Like he still wants to tackle the thing. He's just really mad. Oh, he's like mad as hell and he can't take it anymore.
Yeah.
You feel through a lot of his stories. Uh yeah, I like that. And so we've hinted at a little bit, but just to lay it out for people who don't read along, which is very silly because it's a much more rewarding listening experience. And like we said, it's 3 pages long. 3 pages. Just read it. But um I want to talk about it's so much crammed into 3 pages also. So basically the ending is Prometheus, who is the Titan or like Greek god that gave humanity knowledge and fire and made it so that we were set off on the little path of our tech tree and built up into what we are today. And so he asks, are we related? I guess is the how I interpreted it. Like, are we blood related? Like, are you ancient man and then you evolved into us, implying we're more sophisticated, right? And we're the result of more refinement. And he goes, no, I started you at level 0, like, and you were supposed to join us someday, but you didn't do good, so that's not gonna happen now. And then beneath that we get the part of the sin is that the crass commercialization of that which should give us awe. And I just think that's a lot to weave into 3 fucking pages. It's very, very well written, and is attacking like life with a nuance that you don't usually see through pulp sci-fi. But what I really wanted to ask is, so like, okay, even today, Jen at the store was saying, I'm seeing a huge spike in UFO stuff on TikTok. Okay, that's interesting. Well, whatever, going on with your day. And it's just amazing to me because, like, what if what if it was really happening and proof of alien life was happening today? It's amazing that it's already packaged as a million TikToks, and of course it inevitably would be. And we've reached a stage of digesting life and turning it into little jokes and memes so fast that no matter what happens, like if Jesus came back, there would be a bunch of takes, including really hilarious jokes about it so fast. And that's pretty weird to me. I just think that's weird. Have we lost a place in our lives for awe or God or whatever you want to call it, for Prometheus? Like,
We're not
have we
allowed. We're not
Yeah.
allowed awe. The one of the great challenges of any secular society is how we replace the ritualistic and sort of spiritual nature that religion gives people. I'm not saying it's necessarily even a positive thing, but it does impart on people this sort of grand feeling and emotion. One of the challenges with the secular society, like we have, is that it's impossible to almost believe in anything. You have this sort of naturally flitting, sort of postmodernist view of things that come out of social media. We've got to stay attuned to thing X, thing Y, be watching for it, but also be guarded against it. Guarded against what? I don't know. And on top of it,
Misinformation.
well, and on
right?
top of it, we've got capital pouring itself into us that we have to utilize to make our lives better. What does that mean? I don't know, but we better fucking do it, or else it's like the anxiety,
Or you've wasted your life.
the
right?
anxiety that's caused. And it's one of the things I do love about the way that this ends that I think is actually more existentially horrifying, actually, than a lot of other works that he did, is Prometheus as a self-sacrifice, giving, like, wanted to give fire to man.
The other god said, no, don't do that. We'll punish you.
And he said, fuck it, I'm doing it anyway. They deserve it. And it ends with him basically saying, well, I shouldn't have done that. Like, that's basically,
I really got fucked on this deal.
nice job, assholes. And that if we found Prometheus, which is not, I wouldn't even say like a top 5 myth that people would expect to return. If Prometheus was found, no one would believe it. People would doubt it. He'd be eaten and gone and destroyed, and no one would really know. There'd be a week or 2 of cool memes. To your point, it would be packaged. And I think, again, this is what Harlan's entire point is we just can't help ourselves. We can't wait. We can't take a few extra hours. We have to naturally go to whatever's going to generate capital, whatever's going to generate cash. We've got to save the farm. We've got to do this. We've got to do these things. And those people get to pretend they're doing, great work. Look at, I would compare, if we're talking about current times, when Frank Neller's talking to the reporter, it's Elon Musk. Like it's the same mentality. It's I'm sending people to space. There's nothing more grand.
Changing the world.
I'm changing the world.
While I make billions of dollars.
And people sit in my cars and they know that they're sitting in the future and look at this and look at that. And it's bullshit, flatly bullshit in every single way. But people buy into it, and they buy into it really hard. And it's the nature of, not just America, but capital. It's one of the natures of the sort of system that we live within and how we are produced within it.
And I think the story also alludes to the fact that, the action often comes before the action that's been patterned into you comes, and the story in your head of why did I do that comes later. I think it's really interesting that Frank Miller starts sleeping with the giant and feels like what he's doing is very valuable work because he sees people look at it and he sees awe in their faces, but he sees awe in a 5-minute increment that they paid for, which is, of course, very different than we feel like awe is supposed to be, or our experience with God or the supernatural is supposed to be. And so you mentioned that, faith or belief in supernatural ability to have awe, like that old school cathedral Sistine Chapel awe people used to have when we didn't feel we knew the secrets of the universe.
Yeah. Well, and
It's interesting that it can become anything. Like for this guy, he's like, oh, this is it. For me, it's I'm already there. I'm a good guy. I'm, parceling the Cyclops out to people. I bet that like enriches their life in some way. I can't quite elucidate, but I'm a good guy. That's its own form.
He puts it on himself. He pretends and acts and believes in a serious capacity that he's responsible for that. That he's the one ennobling people. That he's doing these and he's not. He's done none of it. This is, again, I think one of the underlying things I adore about this is it's very clear that it's literally the God who gave man fire, gave men ideas, it's a God who gives shit and makes you better. And here is a man who has taken that God and pretended that his way of restricting access by making it private property, by selling tickets, by doing all these things, somehow he's contributed or made these people ennobled, when in reality it's just the God doing it. But he's happy to take credit. Like underneath it all, it is a deep, deep critique of the very idea that any of us are actually ennobling anyone, or any one of us are actually making that's not how it works. It's not how it works. Very few times ever you could even say such a thing. But we like those stories. We like them for ourselves. And instead, the reality is this God's looking at us and going, well, you fucked up. You could have been amazing. Instead, you're like playing these weird little games with money and tickets and thinking you're special. Like I gave you fire. This is what you did with it.
Yeah, it actually reminds me of something I learned going through AA, and I think applies more globally. The idea that, if you're really down in the dumps, kind of the thing that seems least interesting to do would be to like go out into your community and somehow serve someone else. You're already depleted and hurting. You're the one who needs to be served or whatever. But it is a total brain hack. And of course, you could look at it the cynical way and say, well, then no one's ever actually being altruistic because they feel good about themselves by doing that. But it does work. And you don't have to. It points to something I want to get into next, which I think is very Deleuzian, which is that we tend to think that we do things for reasons, but actually we reason because we did things.
Yes.
Meaning so I feel like this guy is doing that by, why did I do that? Oh, it must be because I'm a good guy, because that's the narrative I want to hold in my head. And Deleuze talks about differences originating identity rather than the other way around. And that's really what I want to vibrate next to the story. And in a nutshell, I know Brooks knows it, but just for the listener, in a nutshell, that's just like saying, you assume that things in the universe exist and have properties. Like I'm looking at a, potted plant. Okay, it has characteristics. The pot is hard, the plant's softer, it has aloe inside, it has spikes on it. It's a cactus. And so you go like, oh, it has qualities, and from that I derive its identity and its characteristics. Actually, that's not true because, and this was mind-blowing to me, everything in the universe can only be known comparatively, meaning if you were to know only cactus in a void of all other context clues, including sensory organs and shit, obviously it's unknowable to you. And truly, all characteristics are just a description of the difference between that thing and other things that you've experienced. And in that way, it's hard to, I really think this makes sense. And hopefully Brooks can also explain it better in his own words. But it's like, everything is nothing because everything could only exist in being dependent on something else existing. And difference is all we ever experience are the differences between things. And that's interesting to me because of a conversation I was blessed to have on the mic with Shane Black about his belief that gods exist to be aspirational figures and create archetypes that we will then instinctively fill. And there are ways for us to like instill those in society. The most famous, the cleanest example being we create gods who are very heroic so that if you were in real life, see a baby that's about to get crushed by a car, you will instinctively, having been fed the story of the hero, you'll be more likely to embody that, become that, and save the baby, which is good for society or whatever.
I don't think I could disagree. I don't think I could disagree more with the.
But now your
life.
take, please. So, your take now, please, on gods.
Yeah,
and their uses.
I don't believe they necessarily have uses. I think they're extraordinarily dangerous, and mythology is dangerous.
But it provides awe. Is awe not a useful emotion?
I don't believe that's what provides awe. I think awe is an emergent emotion that deals with things we don't understand and we haven't been able to recognize patterns of. The more patterns we are unable to recognize, or the more space of possibility that can exist within any singular experience, this is where we are apt to express awe. This is why children experience it a great deal more than people who are slightly older.
They don't know shit.
They don't have the life experience to right. give that. And your explanation of difference, not terrible, not bad, Michael. You're doing good.
I'm just starting to dig into Anti-Oedipus. So yeah.
Oh yeah, no, and again, DGQC, feel free to read along. I read it literally every week for 2 hours. So instead of that, let's pull back and let's talk about like why people believe what they do. Because as you said, and I think you put it really well, I tend to phrase it that words are the excuses we give our emotions. Same kind of thing that we take credit for that which sort of is already happening, and we give ourselves an excuse for the thing that has happened, that our body has done, that we felt, whatever it may be. And this sort of setup goes, it's a lot actually backed up by modern sort of cognitive science, but let's talk about babies. A baby who's born doesn't know breast milk, doesn't know mom, doesn't know dad. There's no like thing there. There's no symbols. It doesn't actually know, or is actually wholly unable to even differentiate between mom, dad, wall, me, anything. There's nothing there. Everything is all. It's always there. The first thing that happens, and it's a biological thing, our bodies are fascinating, is there's an ache in the tummy. It's a dissatisfaction. It's an ache. We don't know what that is. Mommy does because she learned it and her parents learned it like we learned in time. That's hunger. And so mommy grabs, puts baby up to breast or feeds with a bottle, whatever it may be. Lo and behold, that pain is satisfied. Now, that connection, that process, that machine that has created that satisfaction, it isn't just the only one firing off. There are a fuck ton of machines that are firing off, that are little connections made from finger, hand, eye, light, hair,
endocrine
name a
system.
thing. There's a ton. And that connection is remembered, but so is, being wrapped in a blanket and the feeling of all of the nerves as they touch cotton, or the slightly warm feeling or whatever. Like these things happen continuously over time. But again, mom said, "Oh, you're hungry," and puts you up here, and she calls herself mom, and she says, "That's your daddy," points over, and those things happen. That's myth making. This is the same process. It's creating a representation saying this is something. Babies don't know the edges. They don't know the edges of many things. Their studies show that babies don't even know they're separate from their mom until significantly further in development.
They don't understand that objects, right, are permanent.
Yeah, they don't have any of that.
Yeah.
So over time, what we're talking about is the general pattern recognition that's happening as those satisfactions or dissatisfactions or nothing happen. And we start to have edges of things defined. Oh, that's me. And that solves that. Well, I want mom boob. You don't say that necessarily, but at some point you start saying, Mom, I'm hungry.
And me is not mom. Me is differentiable from mom. Again, it's only defined by the difference between the two things.
Yeah. And
everything's relational.
Yeah, everything's relational, but also everything is constantly repeated. And in the repetition of things, there's always difference. We don't notice it because we tend to sort of, just like I would say, you and I most people don't smell their own body odor. for example.
Mhm.
You don't hear your own heartbeat until I've said that. You don't notice that your foot is uncomfortable toes inside of your shoe, because over
Until you
time
do.
we
Yeah.
become desensitized to a great deal of things as well. It's not just oversensitification. It's not just desensitized. We are entire beings. And over time, we start to see ourselves as having edges, as having this, as having that. But again, all of that happens post connection. Like the connection happens, then the satisfaction's recording, and then lo and behold, at some point, there's enough of those happening that we've been able to sort of put together that emergently out comes Michael or Brooks. And we have a sort of a Cartesian style subject, someone who's somewhat self-aware, what we would call that, someone who can refer to themselves as an I, as a me, and have that sort of singular conversation. But all of these things are myths. They're all myths that are taught to us, just like gender is, just like anything else. And the space of representation does this fucked up thing, because as I say, oh, cool. And you go, yeah, no, I'm your dad. I'm a man. And your wife goes, oh yeah, I'm your mom. I'm a woman. The baby, who doesn't know the fuck of any of those things, now starts to see differences. And they see differences between man and woman, as an example, or being told that, oh, you're not manning up enough. Stop crying, be a man, as an example. Or, oh, no, girls don't play that sport. As examples, they're very basic ones, but there's a billion of them out there.
Bocce ball, obviously.
Yeah, obviously. A skee ball, I was thinking, but yeah, same thing. Balls sports.
They shouldn't be handling balls
Not at all.
before puberty.
Yeah.
Is the point. Yeah. Unseemly.
Yes, and they should be fully covered. But the idea is, over time, these words start being used, and then because again, you're just the machines are just connecting. They don't really know man, woman, any of that. Babies don't have that. Machines don't have that. But at some point, you start repressing, and you start seeing images of things, and the image, the myth, the story, the legend that starts telling you how to be ends up causing interior repression, because it comes after you've already done shit. The examples of mine that I've talked with friends about is I had a friend who was married to a woman for many years, and she turned out to be trans and left her wife. Sorry, I'm an old person. It's tough for my brain to make the right gender moves, especially when you've known someone for so long.
But you're putting in the work. No, you're coming from the right place.
Yeah, it's so she had to make a switch, and all of the repression that had been built into making her present masculine, to making her marry a woman, it was a thing we all knew, not like that level, but we knew that this isn't who she was. And she knew it didn't matter. Repression was created because these ideals and these representations were put in place. So, long-winded story to bring it back to all of this. We have kind of two people, and I think Harlan did a brilliant job with this. There's two people who learn the secret of Prometheus. One is Frank, of course, and then the other is
Gibri. Yeah,
is
the farmer.
Yeah, the farmer, Gibri. And so George, when he learns it, and I don't want to be like a pro-rural or say anything of that, but he's a person of the land. He's working class. He's labor class. He's connected to the world in a different way than Frank is. Frank is a capitalist rock star entertainer type. That thing. His reaction is actually just to be it's the first thing that happens. He can't handle it, and he shuts down. And
it's like you said in a sentence, it's the Lovecraftian arc.
Yes.
He's so overawed that he can't live anymore, and he cuts his own throat.
Correct. He realizes nothing mattered anymore.
He intuitively understands that it's Prometheus, it seems, is the implication.
Yes.
Or that it's somehow a god that shows how wanting we are.
Yeah, the phrasing is, George Gibri looked down into the crater and saw it stretched out on its back. Its single green eye with two pupils glowing terribly in the morning sunlight. Its left forearm bent up at the elbow, seeming to clutch with spread fingers at the morning air. It was as if the thing had been struck by the sky's fury as it was trying to dig itself out. For just a moment, as he stared down into the pit, George Gibri felt as if the ganglia mooring his brain were being ripped loose. His head began to tremble on his neck, and he wrenched his gaze from the impossible titan stretched out, filling the 30-foot-long pit. In the orchard, there could be heard the sounds of insects, a few birds, and the whimpering of George Gibri. very different way of dealing with this, or how it was dealt with, or when it happened. Like, what is,
Hmm.
like, again, the types of people, what they did, how they did stuff. He doesn't even try to find sort of that setup. The rock star guy comes and he immediately puts himself in a place of self-importance in relation to this giant, this extraordinary god that has been found there. Doesn't give a shit until, again, we get to the very end, when basically uh he is looking at the giant, watching the giant get torn apart and killed, uh
Hmm.
because his heart and his insides, his guts are being torn up by the vultures, because again, he's Prometheus. uh and he doesn't, like, that's the only time, but it's almost as if he can't possibly have that experience until Prometheus looks at him, and the gift from Prometheus to him is this. That is his fire that he hands to Frank at the last moment, is letting him know he's a piece of shit.
I mean, he's still imparting knowledge. He's doing what Prometheus does. It's knowledge of the next phase. Because also we haven't even mentioned it does end with the something along the lines of, I didn't write it down, but like, and it became darker that night than ever before in the world of man, but not as quiet as it would soon become. Something like that. So the implication being that not only is he judging them wanting, but things are going to start winding down now. Like he has the power to do that, or it seems that we failed the test and something bad is on the horizon. Uh, it's very True Detective season 1 Matthew McConaughey,
Yeah,
honestly.
yeah, I
Yeah.
agree very much.
Okay, so since you did a quote, I'm gonna move us into Harlan's parlance,
Ooh.
where we do quotes. Did you have any other notable quotes you wanted to read? Otherwise, I have a few to rattle off.
No, I'm good. Go for it. I'll
Okay,
see if
I
any
just got
pop in
4
for
short
me.
ones.
I've got a
Well,
couple,
as a
but
right,
I'd want to
yeah,
hear yours.
as a career writer, I also gravitate the ones where I actually am like, hopefully people listening understand how cool the twist or the hook is or whatever, but listen to what a good fucking writer he is as like a rock star doing word guitar solos. So I love that he describes the vulture, the giant bird, descending as the darkness outside seemed to fall. Like the night sky itself is enclosing you. That's very cool to me. This is a solid way to describe something, a very thesaurusy line. Glass lay in a scintillant carpet across the rotunda. Good mouthfeel. Speaking of mouthfeel, I literally am like, this one is just only written down for mouthfeel. Terrible wheels, puckered skins still angrily crimson against the gentle pink of the otherwise unmarred body. That's poetry, dude. The way the sibilants and the consonants like coalesce, like coagulate at the end of the sentence. I just love that. And then the last one, good reference. Billy Joel reference, not directly, but we didn't start the fire. The Macintoshes his trees produced were his hideous and wrinkled as thalidomide babies.
Brutal.
That's a spicy simile. Yeah. His scabrous apple trees, which would lead him to cutting his own throat and bleeding out with a rabbit knife. Okay, on to the silly questions to lighten the mood a little bit, because I think that was a great rousing conversation of the story's themes, probably longer than it would take you to read the story.
For sure.
Um,
It's like a
yeah.
6-minute story.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite pantheon?
A favorite pantheon?
Not for how they've impacted mankind, but like cool factor. And I can go first to buy you time, but I think Egyptians the winner, man. I really like Mayan as well. You got a lot of bird guns, very colorful. They're like the stories of how, the Popol Vuh and stuff and the origin of the maize dough people and stuff is cool. But man, Egyptian with the duat and the weighing the soul against the feather,
Well,
Osiris and Anubis and shit. Just cool for cool factor.
I have to go with, I mean, again, I read way too much to lose, way too much Guattari.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard for me not to go straight to the Dogons, out of, I want to say it's Eastern Africa,
Oh, I
areas.
don't know these.
Mali, Mali area, the Nomo were their gods, and they were very much pre-civilization, pre-set up, and it is very much an odd space of sort of humanoids that are extremely extended, really sort of gorgeous bronze work that comes from the area, and a lot of woodwork through that setup. But there's this great writer, Marcel Griaule, Griaule, who did studies and sort of spent time with the Dogon tribes, and their mythology is deeply unique because I tend to find like the Egyptians, sure, they've got their gods. They got Osiris, god of this, god of that. You tend to see that a lot in sort of these pantheistic religions.
Oh, they claim domains.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like, oh, that's Saturn, the god of blah, blah, blah. And this is the god of
Mhm.
chili beans. And this is the god of like, and that stuff has always been like, it feels very self same because most of them, again, are like all from the Fertile
It's an
Crescent.
easy way to build a religion. Well, you're also wrapping around, like you said, they're basically stopgaps, human shaped or, metaphysically shaped stopgaps for things we don't know already. So they got to fill all that space. So you're like, I don't
Yeah,
understand
but
why
they're
there's
all,
seasons and shit. So it's probably Artemis.
yeah, but they're all also like self same because, they're all from the Fertile Crescent. So there's not a lot of huge,
Sure.
huge changes there. It's one of the reasons I find like the pantheistic sort of versions that Native Americans have, or that you see in like Southeast Asia, pre, integration in Christianity, all fascinating. But the Dogon religion is super fascinating because it's about sort of one splitting into two, splitting into four, scattering and moving their way through. It's a very different way of sort of having, as far as I've read, it's a very unique sort of religion in the way that gods sort of interact with people.
Nice. I will dig into that. I'm excited. Yeah, I gotta actually. I think that's going to be a new hobby is finding out different pantheons of gods I have never even heard of because there's way more than I'm probably imagining.
There are a ton, and Grial was wonderful, and I think had a handful of them. Mostly the Nomo gods
Yeah.
within the Dogons, but there's a ton of writing he did around a lot of
I
stuff.
haven't been on that journey with gods, but I've been on that journey with monsters, Hellboy style. Like, man, there's some cool Indonesian, like how we have vampires and Wolfman. They're analogs of that. Or like, the Kappa in Japan and stuff. Really cool stuff. But I got to do that with gods too. Okay, we're running out of time, but I'm going to ask something dumb so we can like dispense with it quickly. Um, do you think there's anything to Marvel superheroes being a pantheon or even trying to fill that gap for us? And I mean in a crass commercialized packaged way, but is that at all trying to service the same need, do you think?
Oh,
or
yeah.
is it just a coincidence? Or like are superheroes gods?
I wouldn't.
Commercial fake gods?
They play a lot of the same role, but superheroes exist to help everyone who cares to remember that the normative exists and that there are people who will defend it, so you don't have to be too stressed of things changing. Basically, don't worry your pretty little head. I mean, please tell me of any of the movies where it's not just basically returning things to what they were.
Well, yeah, and that's always the problem. Like David Bell on our sister network, Gamefully Unemployed, I think, really astutely pointed out that the latest Batman, the Batman, everything about it, even in terms of traditional storytelling, the 3-act structure or whatever, the lesson he learns is that there shouldn't be a Batman, which is a perfectly valid lesson Batman's encountered before. But because it's a franchise, he literally can't fulfill that promise because there has to be a sequel.
Yep.
So it's hilarious that Batman can never come out of ignorant. Like he'll never fulfill. Like if his trauma were to be processed and healed, he should stop being Batman, and that can never happen, which is tragic in a way. It's almost Promethean, right?
Well,
the Joker comes and
it's the nature of
kills his family over and over and over and over.
It's one of those things that there's a word, and Marx uses it, and a handful of others when they talk about people like Musk or Bezos, or at the time, the wealthy,
our true heroes.
Yeah,
gods,
well,
yes.
they called them capitalist. Sorry, there's a term. I want to make sure I get it right.
Titans.
God,
Cocksocks.
No. A capitalist eunuch. Which is, I think, a great phrase that we tend to believe that people who are in those positions have all the power of the world and that they can do anything they want and they exist in a space of possibility. And it's true to a point. They're able to not worry about, healthcare. They're not worried about
access better healthcare faster.
Yeah.
Travel in nicer conditions.
Yeah. They don't have to worry about food, probably
ever.
Yeah. So like, they don't have the same worries, but like their ability to make grand change because of the way that the system is structured to your point about Batman, I wouldn't even say necessarily because he's part of a franchise that's kind of a fourth wall breaking thing. I would say that the reason Batman can't stop that is because he will run into inevitably the same problem everyone does, which is there will be excuses that they can self-justify for the desire that they already have. And that's the setup. So when Jeff Bezos, for example, or Elon Musk or all these guys are out there and everyone's like, they could change the world. How? Could Bezos like step in and go, hey, it's Amazon's now a cooperative. Like he'd be fired and they'd bring in other people. There's the nature of the system is about fulfilling itself and making sure that it constantly is able to capture any errant excess that may be going on. It does its best. And this is one of those things that the superhero, I think, shows perfectly. And Superman's my favorite for it because people compare all these shitheads to that. Literally, he could just save the world. Like, it would not be hard for him to take like a week, destroy all the weapons, bring us all together. Like, literally
make it so you don't need Superman anymore.
Yeah,
right?
He could literally make himself useless, but he has
this codependent relationship. His ego, his identity is dependent upon Earth being in peril every week.
Yeah,
it's an enclosed.
It wouldn't be hard for him to build transportation networks that would make us able to get food anywhere we wanted. Like the issues with scarcity, which are all generally bullshit for the most part, we could fix those, but we'd rather, not do that.
But I do or what's your thoughts around, I would say the thing that like Buffett, Bezos, Musk could totally do is endorse, vote for, acquiesce to higher taxes on the super wealthy.
Then,
right? Or they could be chill about that or like allow it to happen.
They do to a point. There's people on the pseudo left, like Soros, who endorses that.
Who says, tax.
Like, sure, but he's not going to
to
push higher corporate taxes because if he did, he would lose his seat because that's literally illegal in America is to do anything that hurts the corporation.
And I guess that's what you mean by eunuch. At this point, they are also sitting on top of a giant legal machine that basically tells them what to do most of the time.
Well, and again,
junctures.
Any of us are produced like they are too. Like, it's not like they exist in some place where they're the few people who have agency. We're all produced by the systems that have made us and things that have put us there. They're still bastards for sure. But again, just getting rid of them, it's just going to put someone new in their place. We've seen it throughout history. We've seen that setup.
Oh, right. They are the results. They are the manifestation of forces. That slot would still exist even if Jeff Bezos died tomorrow.
Exactly.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely.
We got to change the whole thing. That's it. To bring it back to the story. It's again, one of these it's Harlan. Every time I'm able to like fucking just continually trace back every one of these things to like, he's always so ridiculous. But again, what is the setup? What is the thing? Well, the system is what he's talking about here because the university was just slightly too slow. They didn't have the money. This is the way it worked out. It's not like, because remember, George's wife is the one who kind of sets this on going because George is, fucked off or killed himself at that point. It's kind of unclear. And so here comes record.
And she's like, we really need the money because the farm is going to fail.
Yeah, because they need that. Yeah. So who's at fault? Like, who's at fault? No, I would argue that the superstructure that creates the entire situation is, and here's the God literally looking at us going, hey guys, this is it. Like, come on. Any of you could,
systems wise,
all you guys could just stop doing this, but you just don't. Everyone gawks. They take their 3 minutes. Everyone feels self-important. They go about their day. It probably makes everyone slightly happier.
They get their little slice of awe for the day, which just feels wrong.
Exactly.
In some way. Yeah, in a gut way. Cool. Final silly question. If you found a supernatural being buried in your yard, which one would you most hope it was? And then what would you do with it? Hopefully not tie it up and show it off for 2 bits of pop. But I'll go first. Griffin, probably because I've seen Neverending Story too many times, but I'd fly a fucking griffin around, bro.
Is he a griffin in Neverending Story?
No, I think he's like a Chinese luck dragon.
Yeah, I was going to say. Yeah.
But I'm just saying actual, mythical. I guess Chinese luck dragons are too, but I like a griffin. They got a lion body. I feel like that's like makes for a smoother ride. You know, the fur body
Um,
versus versus what or scales or feathers.
yeah, I don't even know if I have that.
See, this is why you should have read the questions. You'd have a funny
No,
answer.
I don't have a funny answer. I don't think I even would. Like, because it comes down to what you consider like a mythological god. Taoists believe Lao Tzu is, at this point, they kind of look at him as a mythological god, or maybe he was someone existed. We don't really know. He'd be
Yeah,
top of my list because I'm, that tends to be
you've learned shit.
if I've got a religious sort of side, that would be that sort of thing. Otherwise, I'd
But
probably,
he's got human level intelligence. I feel like you couldn't train him to let him ride you in the same way that you could a griffin.
I probably couldn't ride Lao Tzu. That's fair. He's probably
Yeah,
a 4.5
it's your
foot tall,
downside.
ancient
Mhm.
old Chinese man. I'm probably not
Yeah,
gonna.
or to quote one of my favorite King of the Hill moments. But Lao Tzu would say, "Man, Lao Tzu lived in a cave and ate straw." Probably not that far off.
No, but then beyond that,
But
it'd be
doesn't
like
make you not
I'd
wise.
probably go back to like the Babylonians, like Enki or something like that, where it's
Ooh,
um
yeah, I know.
because
Inking.
the older gods would probably be more interesting because again, they're not like the god of things, even though they sort of are. It's a different
Yeah,
setup. I don't know. I'm not big. I'm not that guy. I'm not that
you're not a god
supernatural. I'm not a
collector.
supernatural guy. I'm
Yeah.
Chris Carter, when he was making the X Files, would talk about is my favorite interview he ever did, when he talked about the poster on the wall in Mulder's office is like, he's like, that's me. It's like, I'm not Mulder, even though I write this stuff. He's like, I'm the guy who wants to believe. I want to believe,
But that doesn't mean I do.
and I
Yeah.
don't. I can't like put myself in any of those positions.
But I'd kill to have a UFO
Eh,
experience. Yeah, for sure. I'm in the same
There we go.
boat.
If I had to choose a mythological character, I would choose a human.
Nice.
There we go.
Nice. I'd choose Chris Carter. Uh, let's see what I had a thought about that. Oh, it's just fascinating to me that almost everything, potentially everything in the universe is a spectrum and not a. I think it is because we arise from like vibrations, but everything being a spectrum and not a thinking of that between the poles of like man or I don't know amoeba and God. The ways in which various pantheons are. They are us. They're a way to express our identity writ large on the stars, or they're totally not us and they're a way to explain the forces that we don't understand that oppress us and
or
bewilder us.
or
It's anywhere in between.
or they
Yeah.
are stories that we invent in order to pretend that we exist and to justify ourselves, because the reality of any human is that we are a self-justification machine first and foremost, and none
Yeah.
of us really exist.
Bye. That's the end of the no. I'm guessing since you didn't read the questions, you probably didn't come up with 3 stupid one-liners about the story. Is that accurate?
I'm not we've been through this. I'm not a comedy writer, and
You're not
I am not
I've had several non-comedy writers do this, but I also, to be fair in the email, always say or don't, because obviously it's a big ask.
if
This
I
will be
had
the
to,
first time.
if I had to,
Yeah.
it would be somewhere along the
Great.
lines of Prometheus, fava beans, and a Chianti.
Oh, folks, the liver. The vulture eats the liver. See, that's good. Okay, I'm gonna rattle off my 3 real quick then, so we can get out of here. This God of War Ragnarok boss fight is surprisingly metaphysical. And number 2, sorry Prometheus, that's just where the shovel landed. I think you look good circumcised. And number 3, guy in the crowd after staring at Prometheus for 2 hours. If anything, I feel like I understand the Alien franchise even less. Oh, folks.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
That's an okay one.
That's a good one.
Our like Razorblade pie on the slab. Brooks, thank you so much for joining me. What a conversation. I love it.
Always.
We will also be covering SRO with Sarah Griffith next time. If you're reading along, I'll also tweet that information. But SRO, I forget where you can find it. I'll tweet that as well. Brooks, you briefly mentioned the Deleuze and Guattari thing, but please let people know exactly where they can find it.
Yep, just Google DGQC on YouTube, the Deleuze and Guattari Quarantine Collective. We're a 3,500 strong Discord server that reads various Deleuze-related books, but specifically I read every Monday, What is Philosophy? And then Tuesday, Anti-Oedipus. And Sunday, I do a random reading on a friend's YouTube as well. So a lot of Deleuze. So I do a lot of Deleuze. And you're free to find
And
us.
I've just,
And it's a decent time if you like that stuff.
It really is. I've just started diving through the archive, and Deleuze is a very interesting cat. I was not familiar. I am finding it very approachable. Like, I totally can understand it and the points he's making, and they're very interesting. Yeah, I'm into it. Check it out. I thought there was something else. Oh, yeah. I wanted to ask before you wrap, because you said you had 1,500 books roughly behind you and only 50 fiction. Did Snow Crash make it?
Oh, no.
You say that with, oh no, okay, especially the
I
last
don't
one got low.
any.
Not a fan. I think it has interesting things to say.
I think it does too, but I'm less a fan of any sort of dystopian world that ends in sort of a fairly nihilistic view of itself. And I do think Neil Stephenson is also not a very good writer.
But along the way, we learn about, how language confines us, and thought is patterned through language, and everything's a meme, including our beliefs about ourselves and the universe. Anyway, this has been like Razorblade Pie. I didn't get the answer I wanted, but
I'm very
that's
sorry.
What happens sometimes.
Very sorry.
All good, bro. I'm going to zoom out of here to deliver a pizza.
You do that.
That's a Snow Crash reference. Bye, everybody.
This has been a Small Beans endeavor. We're a bunch of pals who make podcasts, sketches, music, web series, and movies. The beans always have new ideas percolating, so make sure to check us out at patreon.com/smallbeans. That's patreon.com/smallbeans, where you can browse all of our current and past content, see what we've got planned in the future, and learn how your support can help the small beans grow into huge, giant monster beans. If you enjoyed this content module, please like, rate, subscribe, or tell a friend about us. We love you.